the channel where we talk about real ideas in real English. I'm so happy you're here today. If it's your first time listening, I want to say thank you for joining me. And if you've been with me before, welcome back. You already know this is a place where we learn, grow, and speak better English together. So, go ahead, take a deep breath, and get comfortable. Let's begin today's episode. Today we're talking about something very important, a skill that's powerful in both life and language. That skill is critical thinking. Now don't worry if this sounds like a big or complicated topic. I'm here to guide you through it, step by step, using natural English that helps you understand clearly and speak confidently. So, what is critical thinking, and why should you care about it? Well, think about how many messages we see every day, on the internet, on social media, in the news, even in conversations with friends and family. We hear so many opinions, so many facts, and so many people telling us what to believe or what to do. It's like standing in the middle of a busy street with voices coming from every direction. In this kind of world, it's easy to get confused. It's easy to feel lost. That's why critical thinking is more important now than ever before. Critical thinking is the ability to stop, think clearly, and ask questions before you believe something or make a decision. It's about being smart with your thoughts, not just accepting everything you hear or see. It helps you understand problems better, communicate more effectively, and make decisions that match your values and goals. In simple words, critical thinking is like having a strong mental filter. It helps you clean out the noise and keep what truly matters. Now, don't think this means you need to be a genius or a philosopher to think critically. Not at all. Anyone can learn this skill. You don't need perfect English or a university degree. What you need is curiosity, patience, and a little bit of practice. And that's exactly what we'll do in this episode. Explore this skill together, using clear examples and stories that make sense for your daily life. As always, I'll be using vocabulary and sentence patterns that are great for upper intermediate B2 English learners. So, if you want to improve your English and become a smarter thinker, you're in the right place. All right, are you ready to dive in? Let's take a closer look at what critical thinking really means, and how it can change the way you see the world. Let's slow things down for a moment and take a closer look at the two words in critical thinking. Before we try to understand this important life skill, we first need to ask, what does critical mean? And what is thinking anyway? Now, when people hear the word critical, they often imagine something negative, like someone pointing out problems or judging others. But that's only one meaning of the word. In our context today, critical means something different. It means being careful, thoughtful, and serious about how we look at things. When you are critical in your thinking, it doesn't mean you're rude or negative. It means you're not easily fooled. You don't just accept everything at first glance. You ask questions. You try to see the full picture. You want to be sure before you believe, decide, or act. Being critical in this way is actually a strength. It helps you protect yourself from false information, poor choices, and emotional mistakes. All right, so that's critical. But what about the second word? Thinking. Thinking is something we do all the time. But have you ever stopped to ask what thinking really is? It's the process your brain uses to make sense of the world around you. When you're thinking, you're not just remembering facts, you're connecting ideas, solving problems, imagining new situations, or trying to understand people and events. Sometimes thinking is fast, like when you answer a simple question. And sometimes it's slow and deep, like when you're making an important decision or trying to understand something complex. You might be thinking, Okay, so I know what thinking is, and I get that critical means careful or thoughtful. So what happens when we put those two words together? That's where it gets interesting, and that's what we'll explore in the next section. Because critical thinking is not just thinking more or thinking harder. It's a very special kind of thinking. It's a skill, a habit, a way of looking at the world that helps you make better choices, avoid mistakes, and grow as a person. It's something that can help you in school, at work, in your relationships, and in almost every part of your life. But to really understand what critical thinking is, how it works, what it looks like in action, and why it's so important, we need to go deeper. So in the next part of this podcast, we're going to break it down carefully and talk about what critical thinking really means in everyday life, with examples, ideas, and tips you can use. So, stay with me. What comes next might just change the way you think about thinking. So, let's start with a simple question. What exactly is critical thinking? At first, the phrase critical thinking might sound a bit serious or even negative. Some people think it means criticizing things all the time, or pointing out what's wrong with everything. But that's actually not what it means at all. Critical thinking doesn't mean being negative. It means being thoughtful, curious, and careful about what you believe, what you say, and what you do. In simple words, critical thinking is the ability to look at a situation, idea, or problem, and not just accept the first answer or opinion that comes to your mind. It means you take a step back. You ask yourself, is this really true? Where is this information coming from? What else could be going on here? Instead of just believing something because someone told you, or because it feels good, or because it's popular, you pause, you analyze it, you ask questions, you try to understand it from different sides before making your own decision. You can think of critical thinking like being a detective in your own mind. Just like a detective looks at evidence, asks questions, and doesn't make conclusions too quickly, a critical thinker does the same thing, but with ideas, information, and everyday choices. Imagine you hear a news story that makes you angry. A critical thinker would stop and ask, why does this make me feel this way? Is the story one-sided? Who wrote it? And what might their goal be? It's not about finding a perfect answer. It's about understanding more deeply. Critical thinking is also a little bit like checking the ingredients before eating something new. You don't just eat it because it looks good. You want to know what's inside. In the same way, a critical thinker doesn't just believe something because it sounds nice or because everyone else agrees. They want to know what's behind the message, the reason, the logic, the facts. Another way to describe it is this. Critical thinking is the skill of not jumping to conclusions. It's the ability to stay calm, keep an open mind, and look at the big picture. It's not always easy. In fact, many of us are trained to respond quickly, to agree with the crowd, or to believe something just because we've always believed it. But critical thinking asks us to slow down, take a breath, and look again, more carefully. Now, you might be wondering, why is this important for me, especially as someone learning English? That's a great question. The truth is, learning a language is not just about learning new words. It's about learning to think in new ways. When you think critically, you also improve your communication. You explain yourself more clearly. You ask better questions. You listen more deeply. And that helps you not only speak better English, it helps you connect better with people, solve problems more easily, and make stronger decisions in your life. Let's look at a very simple example. Imagine your friend tells you, "This food is unhealthy. You should never eat it." A quick reaction might be to agree and stop eating that food. But critical thinking asks, why does my friend believe this? Where did they get their information? Is that food always unhealthy or just in some situations? What does science say? What do I believe? You're not arguing. You're just thinking for yourself. And that's powerful. In daily life, critical thinking shows up in many small ways. When you read an article online and ask if it's true, when you hear a rumor and decide not to spread it, when you reflect on your own mistakes and try to learn from them. It's not about being perfect. It's about being more aware, more conscious of your thoughts and actions. It's also okay to not have all the answers. That's part of being a critical thinker, too. Sometimes we have to say, I'm not sure yet, or I need more information before I decide. In a world where people often speak too fast, post too fast, and decide too fast, being someone who can pause and think is actually very rare and very valuable. So, to sum it up, critical thinking is not about being critical in a negative way. It's not about being difficult or slow. It's about being smart with your thoughts, asking questions, looking for evidence, and staying open-minded. It helps you understand things more deeply, make better decisions, and grow as a learner and as a person. Now that you have a clear picture of what critical thinking really means, let's talk about why it matters so much. Especially in today's world, where information is everywhere, and it's not always easy to know what to trust. Why it matters more than ever. Now let's talk about why critical thinking is more important today than ever before. And to understand that, we need to think about the world we live in. Every day we are surrounded by so much information. We see posts on social media, videos on YouTube, short messages on Twitter, advertisements on the street, news on TV, and don't forget the things our friends, family, or teachers tell us too. In fact, some experts say we now receive more information in one day than people in the past received in an entire week. That's a lot to deal with. But here's the problem. Not all of this information is true, helpful, or healthy. Some messages are designed to make us feel angry or afraid. Others are meant to sell us something or make us agree with someone's opinion, even if it's not based on facts. Some information is shared without thinking, just because it's popular or emotional. And when we don't take the time to stop and think, we might start to believe things that aren't true. We might make decisions that don't really help us. We might even spread the same misinformation to other people, without meaning to. That's where critical thinking becomes so powerful. It helps us filter the information we receive, like using a coffee filter to remove what we don't need and keep what's useful. When we think critically, we don't just react. We pause, we breathe, and we ask ourselves, does this make sense? Is there any evidence? Is this the full story, or just one side of it? Let me give you a few simple examples. Imagine you see a post online that says, a certain food causes cancer. It sounds serious. You feel worried. But instead of sharing it right away, a critical thinker would check the source. Is this from a scientific website, or just a random blog? Is there research behind it, or just an emotional story? Maybe they'll read more articles or ask a doctor. They don't panic. They investigate. That's critical thinking in action. Or let's say someone in your class says, you'll never get a good job unless you go to a top university. At first, this might feel true. You might even feel discouraged. But then you stop and ask, is that really true for everyone? What about people who succeed without famous degrees? What other skills do employers look for? Again, you're not rejecting the idea immediately. You're just thinking more deeply about it. That's what critical thinkers do. We can also use critical thinking in our everyday relationships. Imagine a friend sends you a message that sounds rude. Maybe they didn't say hello or forgot to thank you. It's easy to feel hurt or angry. But before you respond, you take a moment. You ask yourself, is it possible they were busy or tired? Do they usually speak like this? Could I be misunderstanding their tone? Instead of reacting emotionally, you reflect first. This small pause, this little moment of thinking, can actually save a friendship. It can turn conflict into understanding. Critical thinking even helps with bigger life decisions. Whether you're choosing a job, thinking about moving to a new place, or deciding who to trust, it's useful to look at the facts, consider different perspectives, and be honest with yourself. It's not about being slow, it's about being smart. When we take time to think clearly, we make better choices. And better choices lead to a better life. The truth is, we live in a very fast world. Everyone wants quick answers. People want to click, buy, react, and move on. But sometimes the fastest choice is not the best one. Critical thinking asks us to slow down just a little, not to doubt everything, but to understand more. It gives us the power to decide for ourselves, instead of letting the internet, media, or other people make all our decisions for us. And here's one more thing. Critical thinking is not only about big ideas. You don't need to wait for a crisis to start thinking critically. It's useful in everyday moments, like deciding which clothes to buy, how to spend your time, who to follow online, or even what to believe about yourself. Yes, even your own thoughts sometimes need to be questioned. Have you ever told yourself, "I'm not good enough," or "I can't do this"? What if those thoughts aren't true? What if they're just old stories you've been repeating for years? Critical thinking allows you to stop and say, wait, where is this belief coming from? Is it helping me or holding me back? So, to put it simply, critical thinking matters today because the world is full of noise, pressure, and fast opinions. When you learn to think critically, you give yourself space. Space to understand, to choose, and to grow. You protect your mind, your emotions, and your energy. And in a world that moves fast, that kind of strength is more important than ever. Let's keep going, and now look at some of the most common myths people believe about critical thinking, and why they're not true. Common myths about critical thinking. Let's take a moment to talk about some common myths, or false beliefs, about critical thinking. These are ideas that many people believe, but they aren't actually true. And sometimes, these beliefs stop people from developing this powerful skill. So let's explore them and clear up the confusion. One of the biggest myths is this: you have to be super smart to think critically. This is simply not true. Critical thinking is not about having a high IQ or being the smartest person in the room. It's not only for people who went to university or studied philosophy. Critical thinking is something that everyone can learn and practice. It's a skill, like cooking or driving. And like any skill, you get better with practice. Of course, education can help, but critical thinking is more about your attitude and your habits than your school background. If you're willing to pause, ask good questions, and look deeper, you're already thinking critically. Another myth is, critical thinking is only for academics or intellectuals. Again, this is false. You don't need to be a scientist, professor, or expert to think critically. In fact, critical thinking is just as important in everyday life. Maybe even more important. Whether you're deciding what to buy at the supermarket, how to reply to a message, or what job to accept, critical thinking helps you make better choices. It's not something that only belongs in a classroom or a textbook. It belongs in your home, your relationships, your work, and your conversations. Even young people can start learning how to think critically. It's for everyone, not just for so-called intellectuals. There's another common misunderstanding that says critical thinking means being negative or always doubting everything. But that's not what it means at all. Being a critical thinker doesn't mean you walk around judging everything or thinking that everyone is wrong. It doesn't mean you say no to every idea. It simply means that you don't believe things too quickly or too easily. You stay curious. You ask thoughtful questions. And yes, sometimes you doubt, but in a healthy way. You don't doubt because you're negative. You doubt because you care about the truth, and you want to understand things more clearly. In fact, critical thinking is a very positive skill. It helps you avoid mistakes. It helps you stay open-minded. And it helps you become more confident, not more doubtful. When you understand why you believe something, you feel more sure about your choices. You don't have to be afraid of new ideas or different opinions, because you know how to think for yourself. That's not negative. That's powerful. Some people also believe that critical thinking is something you either have or don't have. But that's not true either. Nobody is born a great critical thinker. It's something we all learn over time. And yes, it takes practice. You might get it wrong sometimes. You might make fast decisions or believe something that isn't true. But that's okay. Every time you stop, reflect, and try again, you're improving your thinking. Progress is more important than perfection. So the next time you hear someone say, "Oh, I'm not smart enough to think critically," or "That's not for people like me," don't believe it. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be curious, honest, and willing to learn. That's how it starts. How critical thinkers think differently. Let's take a moment now to explore how critical thinkers actually think differently. What makes them stand out? What habits do they have? And what kind of mindset helps them see the world in a deeper, more thoughtful way? Well, one of the first things you'll notice about critical thinkers is that they ask a lot of questions. Not just any questions, but good questions. They often ask things like, "Why do I believe this?" Or, "What if there's another explanation?" These questions are not meant to create problems or make things complicated. They're there to help understand things better. Instead of quickly accepting something as true, a critical thinker wants to know why it's true. They are not afraid to dig a little deeper. Think about this. Have you ever been in a situation where someone tells you, "That's just how it is"? Maybe at school, at work, or even in your family? A critical thinker won't just accept that answer. They'll pause and ask, "But why is it that way? Is there another way to look at it?" They don't ask to be rude or difficult. They ask because they care about truth, fairness, and understanding. This habit of asking why is a powerful tool. It keeps their minds active and open. Another thing that makes critical thinkers different is that they look for evidence before making a decision. Let's say someone tells you that a certain diet can help you lose weight fast. A quick thinker might say, "Great, I'll try it." But a critical thinker would ask, "What's the evidence? Has this worked for other people? Is there any scientific support for this idea?" They might do a little research, read different opinions, or ask an expert before they decide. They're not just looking for what sounds good, they're looking for what is good, what's real, what's helpful. This habit of looking for evidence is really important in today's world, where we often see headlines like, "This one trick will change your life," or "Experts hate this secret method." These types of messages are made to grab your attention. But critical thinkers don't just react. They stop and ask, wait a minute, what's the proof behind this? It doesn't mean they never try new things. It just means they try things carefully, with their eyes open. Something else that separates critical thinkers from the crowd is that they are okay with not having all the answers. And this might surprise you, because we usually think smart people always know everything, right? But actually, one of the signs of a strong thinker is being able to say, I don't know, yet. Instead of pretending to be sure or choosing an answer just to feel comfortable, critical thinkers are honest with themselves. If they don't have enough information, they wait. They learn more. They keep their minds open. And that's not weakness. It's wisdom. Here's a quick story from my own life. A few years ago, a friend of mine asked me to join a business opportunity. He was very excited and told me, "This is the future. You have to get in now." It sounded exciting, and honestly, I almost said yes without thinking. But something inside me said, slow down, ask some questions. So I did. I started asking, where is the money coming from? Who's behind this company? Is it legal? Is it ethical? And guess what? After doing some research, I found that it wasn't what it appeared to be. It wasn't a smart or safe investment. If I had just followed the excitement or the pressure, I could have lost a lot. But because I took a step back and asked questions, I made a better decision. That's how critical thinking protects you in real life. Critical thinkers also try to understand different perspectives. They don't just say, this is my opinion and I'm right. They ask, how do other people see this? What if I'm missing something? They listen. They reflect. Even when they disagree, they try to understand. And that makes them not just better thinkers, but also better communicators, better leaders, and better friends. And finally, critical thinkers are not controlled by emotions. Of course, we all have emotions. We're human. But instead of reacting too fast when they feel angry, sad, or excited, critical thinkers take a breath. They pause. They ask themselves, is this feeling helping me right now? Or do I need to calm down before making a choice? That little pause, that moment of reflection, can change everything. It's like having a conversation with yourself before reacting to the world. That conversation might sound like, this sounds interesting, but is it true? Or, I'm feeling angry right now. Should I wait before I reply? Or even, I don't know much about this topic. Maybe I should listen more before I speak. These small habits, repeated over time, become part of your mindset. They become how you think, how you speak, how you live. So, to sum it all up, critical thinkers think differently because they ask deep questions. They look for real evidence. They are open to learning, and they're not afraid to say, I don't know. They reflect before they react, and they understand that not everything is black or white. Life is complex, and critical thinking helps us navigate that complexity with more wisdom and less stress. Barriers to thinking critically. Now let's move on and talk about something really important. The barriers, or the things that get in the way, of thinking critically. Because here's the truth. Even when we want to think more clearly, it's not always easy. Sometimes, something inside us stops us. Sometimes, the world around us pushes us in a different direction. And if we don't understand these barriers, we can't break them. So, let's start with one of the most common blocks: emotions. Have you ever made a fast decision just because you were angry, scared, or really excited? Maybe you said something you didn't mean, or bought something you didn't need, or believed something without thinking. Emotions are a natural part of being human. We all feel them. But sometimes, strong emotions can cloud our judgment. When we feel too much, we stop thinking clearly. Fear can make us believe things that aren't true. Anger can close our ears to other people's opinions. Excitement can make us trust ideas without checking them first. So here's a question for you. Have you ever believed something just because it made you feel good? Not because it was true? Emotions are powerful, but if we're not careful, they can lead us away from clear thinking. Another big barrier is self-doubt. That's when you start thinking things like, maybe I'm not smart enough, or what if I'm wrong, or I don't want to sound stupid. And let's be honest, we've all been there. Many people avoid asking questions because they're afraid of how others will see them. They stay quiet in discussions because they don't trust their own voice. But here's the truth. Asking questions doesn't make you weak. It makes you strong. It means you're thinking. It means you care. So ask yourself, what stops you from questioning things more often? Is it fear of being wrong? Fear of judgment? You're not alone. But remember, every critical thinker was once unsure, too. Confidence grows when we give ourselves permission to explore. Now, let's talk about bias. This is a tricky one because most of us don't even know we have it. Bias is when we prefer certain ideas, people, or information, without even realizing it. Maybe it's because of our culture, how we were raised, or the people we spend time with. For example, you might believe one group is always right, and another is always wrong. Or you might trust a famous person just because they're famous, not because their ideas make sense. The problem with bias is that it makes us close our minds. We stop listening. We stop questioning. We only see what we want to see. That's why it's so important to ask, am I being fair? Am I only looking at one side? A good critical thinker tries to be aware of their own bias and works to understand other perspectives, even if it feels uncomfortable. Then there's mental laziness. It's not a fun word, but it's real. Let's be honest. Thinking deeply takes effort. It's easier to just accept what someone says. It's easier to follow the crowd. It's easier to say, whatever, than to say, let me look into that. But easy is not always better. And in a world full of fast answers, critical thinking asks you to slow down, to pause, to think, to reflect. But not everyone wants to do that. Sometimes we feel tired. Sometimes we're distracted. Sometimes we think, why bother? But let me ask you, have you ever accepted something just because it was easier than thinking about it? We all have. But here's the truth. The easy way often leads to mistakes. The thoughtful way leads to growth. And finally, one of the strongest barriers of all, peer pressure. The pressure to go along with what everyone else thinks or does. This can happen at any age, in any place, at school, at work, online, even at home. Sometimes we believe something not because we've thought about it carefully, but just because everyone around us believes it. And we don't want to be different. We don't want to stand out. But here's the danger. When we stop thinking for ourselves, we lose our voice. So I'll ask you again, have you ever believed something just because everyone else did? It takes courage to question what's popular. It takes strength to say, I'm not sure, or I see it differently. But that's exactly what critical thinkers do. They stay kind, but they also stay true to their own mind. So yes, there are many barriers to thinking critically. Emotions, self-doubt, bias, laziness, peer pressure. But here's the good news. Just because they're there doesn't mean they have to stop you. The first step is to notice them. The second step is to challenge them. And the third step is to keep going, to keep asking, exploring, reflecting. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be aware. The more you practice thinking critically, the easier it becomes to catch yourself before reacting too fast, before accepting something blindly, before following the crowd without question. And when you do that, when you build this habit, you'll start to feel stronger, more confident, more independent. You'll start making decisions that feel right for you, not just for others. And little by little, those decisions will shape your life in a more thoughtful, meaningful way. Let's continue now and talk about how to develop and practice critical thinking every day in real, simple ways that you can use starting today. Simple ways to build your critical thinking. So now that we've talked about what critical thinking is and the barriers that can get in the way, let's move on to something really useful. Simple ways you can start building your critical thinking skills in daily life. You don't need to take a course or read a big book. You can begin right where you are, with just a few small changes to the way you think, speak, and make choices. One of the easiest and most powerful things you can do is to pause before reacting. It sounds simple, right? But most of us don't do it. We often react without thinking, especially when we feel stressed, angry, or excited. Someone says something we don't like, and we answer quickly. We see a post online, and we believe it immediately. We get emotional, and we act fast. But here's a secret. Your first reaction is not always your best one. If you give yourself just a little space, a few seconds, or even a full minute, you give your brain time to catch up. You allow yourself to think more clearly. So the next time you feel pressure to respond or decide quickly, try to pause and ask yourself, is this how I really want to respond? That small moment of reflection can help you avoid many problems and make smarter decisions. Another powerful way to build your critical thinking is to ask better questions. Many people are afraid to ask questions. They think it makes them look weak or unsure. But actually, asking questions is what makes you wise. Not just any questions, but good ones. For example, instead of asking, "Is this true?" you might ask, "What evidence supports this?" Instead of asking, "Do I agree with this?" you can ask, "Why do I agree or disagree with this?" These types of questions help you dig deeper. They open your mind. They help you understand the situation more clearly. You don't have to ask out loud. You can ask yourself. You can ask quietly in your mind. But the habit of asking thoughtful questions is the heart of critical thinking. Now, let's talk about something that's a little uncomfortable, but really important. One of the best ways to strengthen your mind is to consider the opposite viewpoint. Yes, even if you totally disagree with it, especially then. Let's say you believe strongly in something, a rule, a choice, or an idea. Try asking, "What would someone who disagrees with me say?" Or, "Why might someone see this differently?" This doesn't mean you have to change your opinion. It just means you're practicing the skill of understanding different perspectives. When you do this, you become more flexible, more open-minded, and more balanced, and you're less likely to make unfair judgments. It takes courage, but it helps you grow. Here's another habit that helps a lot. Reflect after making a decision. We all make choices every day. Some are small, like what to eat. Some are big, like who to trust or what job to take. But how often do we stop and think after the decision? Try this. After making a choice, ask yourself, "What went well here?" And "What could I have done better?" You don't need to be hard on yourself. This is not about guilt or shame. It's about learning. When you reflect on your choices, you become more aware of your patterns. You see what works and what doesn't. And next time, you'll be able to think more clearly. Let's also not forget that critical thinking isn't just about what you think, but also about how you listen. Good thinkers are good listeners. They pay attention to what others say. They try to understand before they respond. So if you want to improve your thinking, try listening more carefully in your daily conversations. Don't just wait for your turn to speak. Really hear the other person. Ask yourself, what are they really trying to say? This builds empathy, respect, and stronger communication, all of which are connected to better thinking. And here's something you can try today. Ask yourself this simple question. What's one area of my life where I could think more clearly? Maybe it's at work, where you make fast choices under pressure. Maybe it's in your relationships, where emotions sometimes take over. Maybe it's in how you spend your time, your money, or your energy. Pick one area and start paying more attention to how you think in that space. What do you believe? Why do you believe it? Are you open to changing your mind if you learn something new? Remember, building critical thinking doesn't happen all at once. It's like building a muscle. It grows slowly, with practice. The more you pause, question, listen, and reflect, the stronger your thinking becomes. And over time, you'll start noticing something powerful. You'll feel more in control of your choices. You'll feel more confident in conversations. You'll stop reacting out of habit and start responding with purpose. So, just begin. Start small. Practice one habit today. Maybe pause before you speak, or ask a better question during your next conversation. With each small step, you're building a more thoughtful, more powerful version of yourself. Let's continue in the next part, where we'll explore how critical thinking connects to success, confidence, and everyday problem solving, and how this one skill can truly shape your future. A personal story or cultural example. Let me share a personal story with you, one that taught me a lot about critical thinking, even though I didn't realize it at the time. A few years ago, I was offered a new job. On paper, it looked perfect. The salary was great, the company had a big name, and everyone I spoke to said I should take it. "You'd be crazy not to," they said. "It's a great opportunity." And honestly, I agreed. At first, it seemed like the smart move. But deep down, something didn't feel quite right. Still, I ignored that feeling. I listened to the people around me. I followed the idea that success means earning more money, working for a big company, and moving fast in your career. I didn't stop to ask myself the important questions. I didn't think critically. I didn't ask, is this job really the right fit for me? Or, will I be happy doing this every day? Instead, I accepted the job and started working. At first, everything was fine, but after a few weeks, I began to feel stressed and tired. I was working long hours doing tasks that didn't match my strengths. The team environment wasn't supportive. The values of the company didn't align with mine. I wasn't excited to wake up and go to work. In fact, I started to feel stuck. That's when I finally stopped and asked myself the questions I should have asked earlier. I asked, why did I take this job? The answer was clear. Because of what other people thought. Not because I had thought it through carefully. I realized I had made a big decision based on fear. Fear of missing out. Fear of looking unambitious. Fear of making the wrong choice. So I decided to leave. It wasn't easy. Some people thought I was giving up, but I didn't see it that way. I saw it as learning. I saw it as growth. That experience helped me understand how powerful critical thinking is, especially when it comes to making choices that affect your life. It showed me how important it is to pause, reflect, ask hard questions, and listen to yourself. not just to the noise around you. Now, before making big decisions, I take my time. I ask myself, what are the facts? What do I really want? Am I thinking for myself or just following the crowd? And I try to do the same even with smaller decisions. This habit has helped me avoid mistakes, feel more confident, and stay true to what really matters to me. You see, critical thinking isn't just something you use at school or work. It's something that helps you build a life that feels right for you. It helps you become stronger, more independent, and more in control. So here's my question for you. Have you ever made a choice because of pressure or fear, not because it was what you truly wanted? And what would happen if, next time, you slowed down and really thought it through? Critical thinking doesn't mean you'll never make mistakes, but it means the choices you make will come from a clear, thoughtful place. And that makes all the difference. So as we come to the end of this episode, let's take a moment to look back at what we've talked about. We started by asking a simple but powerful question. What is critical thinking? And we discovered that it's more than just thinking carefully. It's about asking the right questions, staying open to new ideas, checking facts, and not simply following the crowd. It's about being thoughtful, curious, and honest with yourself, even when it's not easy. We also talked about why critical thinking matters in real life. It helps you make smarter choices, solve problems better, and avoid being tricked by false information. Whether you're choosing what to believe, how to act, or even who to trust, critical thinking gives you the power to pause, reflect, and decide from a place of confidence, not just emotion or pressure. But we also explored the barriers, the things that can stop us from thinking clearly. Maybe it's strong emotions, like fear or anger. Maybe it's self-doubt or mental laziness. Maybe it's just the habit of believing what we hear without asking questions. And you know what? That's okay. We all face those things. What matters is that we notice them. Once you see the problem, you can start to change it. Then we looked at simple ways to build your critical thinking, ways you can start today. We said, pause before reacting. Ask better questions. Try to see the other side of the story. Listen more. Reflect after decisions. These are small steps, but they make a big difference over time. You don't have to be perfect. You just need to practice little by little, with consistency. And I shared a personal story to show that we don't always get it right. And that's okay too. We learn by doing. We grow by trying. Critical thinking is not a fixed skill. It's something you build, like a muscle. And every time you pause, reflect, and choose carefully, you're getting stronger. Now maybe you're wondering, can I really do this? Let me tell you something important. Yes, you can. You're already doing it right now. Just by listening to this podcast, you're paying attention. You're thinking about your thinking. That's the first step. And here's the truth. You are smarter than you think. You don't need to have all the answers. You just need the courage to ask better questions. So I want to leave you with a challenge. After this episode, take a few minutes to speak or write about a moment in your life when you used, or didn't use, critical thinking. Maybe you made a choice that turned out well because you took the time to think carefully. Or maybe you followed emotion and later realized you could have made a better decision. Don't worry about grammar or mistakes. Just express yourself. Use English to grow, to reflect, to learn. And keep going. Keep practicing. Keep thinking. This is how you grow, not just as an English learner, but as a person. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, share, and subscribe to stay tuned for more inspiring content. And don't forget to leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences with critical thinking. Let's learn and grow together. Thanks so much for spending this time with me today. I hope you feel inspired, encouraged, and a little more confident in your own ability to think clearly and live wisely. You've got this. Keep learning, keep asking, and above all, keep thinking.